Welcome to a reality powered by flaming buffalo dung, where the military's most brilliant tactical innovation was a herd of angry camels, and your local barber was also the guy performing your emergency appendectomy. This wasn't some bizarre fever dream or a surrealist comedy sketch. This was the American Wild West, an era we've been taught to idolize as a time of rugged heroes and stoic pioneers. But today, we've gathered the evidence to prove that the Old West was actually a gloriously, profoundly dumb chapter of human history. Buckle up, because we're about to peel back the cinematic polish and look at the gritty, smelly, and flat-out idiotic reality of the frontier. Number 1. The communal stew pot, the myth of the hot bath. Imagine this. You've spent 14 days on a dusty trail. You're caked in so much trail grit and dried sweat that you're practically a walking geological formation. Your clothes have become a second skin, and your scent is enough to startle a pack of wolves. You finally stumble into a frontier town, and your eyes light up at a sign promising a hot bath. You're imagining a private oasis, a steaming tub of lavender-scented water where you can wash away the sins of the trail. Except in the Wild West, a hot bath was less of a luxury and more of a communal human stew pot. Water was a precious, labor-intensive commodity. Someone had to haul it from a distant well, heat it over a dung fire, and pour it into a wooden tub. Because of the sheer effort involved, one tub of water often served an entire family, then their neighbors, and maybe a few passing strangers for good measure. There was a strict social hierarchy to the tub. Father went first, then mother, then the children in descending order of age or importance. By the time it was your turn, the weary traveler or the youngest sibling, the water had the color and consistency of questionable beef gravy. You aren't getting clean, you were just getting intimately acquainted with the collected filth, dead skin, and bacteria of everyone who bathed before you. You'd likely emerge from that tub stickier and dirtier than when you went in, having been baptized in the town's communal grime. Number 2. The tombstone paradox. Gun control in the gunslinger capital. When you think of Tombstone, Arizona, your brain immediately cues the sounds of spurs jingling and non-stop shootouts. You picture Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and cowboys with itchy trigger fingers lurking behind every swinging saloon door. You'd naturally assume that in the town synonymous with the OK Corral, everyone was walking around armed to the teeth, ready to draw at the slighted insult. Well, here's the plot twist that Hollywood conveniently forgot. Tombstone actually had some of the most stringent gun control laws in the entire United States at the time. Ordinance Number 9 strictly prohibited anyone from carrying deadly weapons within city limits. Upon arriving in town, you were legally required to check your firearms at a local stable or hotel, much like checking a coat at a fancy restaurant today. The most famous gunfight in American history, the OK Corral, actually happened because the Earps, acting in their capacity as lawmen, were trying to enforce this very ordinance against the Clanton and McLaury families. The Clantons didn't want to give up their guns, and the Earps weren't taking no for an answer. The town that defined the Wild West shootout was ironically trying to be a weapon-free zone. It's a special kind of irony that the legendary Wild West was actually a place where the law was desperately trying to stop people from playing cowboy. Number 3. The pharmacy of addiction, miracle cures, and liquid heroin. Got a nagging cough, a toothache that's driving you mad, general malaise from, just trying to survive the 19th century? No problem at all. The local frontier pharmacy, or perhaps a charming traveling salesman with a shiny waistcoat, had a miracle cure waiting for you. The secret ingredient in these patent medicines? Usually a massive unregulated dose of opium, morphine, straight-up heroin, or even high-grade cocaine. These were sold over the counter without a single question asked. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, a popular remedy for teething babies and colicky infants, was essentially liquid morphine. Imagine a world where parents were accidentally turning their toddlers into junkies just to get a good night's sleep. Even the original recipe for Coca-Cola famously included cocaine to provide that extra pep for the weary pioneer.
These medicines promised to cure everything from cancer to a broken heart, but their primary function was simply getting the entire population dangerously addicted. Taking your medicine in the 1880s wasn't about healing, it was about rolling the dice with a potent, unregulated narcotic cocktail that was just as likely to kill you as the disease it was supposed to treat. Number 4. The Symphony of Filth, the real smell of the frontier. Welcome to Deadwood, circa 1880. In the movies, these boom towns look like charming rustic settlements. In reality, Deadwood was a symphony of filth. The town's rapid growth completely outpaced any concept of public sanitation or civil engineering. This wasn't just a few smelly garbage cans. We're talking about a miasma of waste that could be smelled from miles away. Raw sewage flowed openly in ditches right alongside the main street. Mountains of trash and horse manure piled up in alleyways. And if a mule or an ox died in the street, it was often simply left there to decompose under the sun. The entire town festered under a putrid cloud of rot, so legendarily bad that it triggered a massive deadly typhoid epidemic. In their frantic, gold-crazed pursuit of wealth, the people of Deadwood completely overlooked the minor detail of not living in their own excrement. It took a literal plague for them to realize that basic hygiene might be more valuable than a winning poker pot. The golden age of the West was actually a brown age of dysentery and rot. Number 5. Exploding pants, the hidden dangers of mining fashion. Life on the frontier was full of obvious cinematic dangers, venomous rattlesnakes, armed bandits, and mountain lions. But one of the most bizarre and terrifying threats was something far more personal: your own pants. Specifically, your trousers could and would spontaneously combust. Miners working with blasting powder frequently dealt with saltpeter, also known as potassium nitrate. This chemical would easily soak into their heavy denim or wool clothing during a long shift in the mines. Later that evening, when a miner stood too close to a campfire or an open stove to dry off or warm his legs, the physics of chemistry took over. Add a spark or a localized burst of heat to saltpeter-socked fabric, and suddenly your trousers would combust in a blinding flash of white-hot flame. Imagine the sheer absurdity of surviving a mine collapse or a cave-in, only to be taken out by your own wardrobe during laundry day. It's hard to maintain a tough guy reputation in the saloon when you have to explain that your pants declared war on you and won.
Number 6. The Gig Economy Cowboy, Debt on the Range. The classic image of the cowboy is a rugged, self-reliant hero who owns nothing but his trusty horse, his saddle, and his six-shooter. He's a free spirit, roaming the plains at his own whim. The reality? He was essentially a minimum-wage agricultural worker on a long-term, restrictive contract. Most cowboys didn't own the horse they rode. It belonged to the ranch. They didn't own the saddle, and often they didn't even own the gun they carried. Everything was company property, loaned out for the duration of the drive. They were the original gig economy workers, living paycheck to paycheck, and often finding themselves deep in debt to the company store or the local saloon. The myth of the independent, wealthy frontiersman was largely a creation of dime novels written by people in New York who had never even seen a cow. Real cowboys were overworked, underpaid, and spent most of their lives covered in mud, just trying to make rent on the range. Number 7. The corset crisis, fashion over survival. The Wild West demanded absolute practicality. Life was grueling and the environment was unforgiving. Yet, despite the constant threat of death and the physical labor required to survive, 19th century fashion trends persisted with an agonizing, almost suicidal devotion. Women on the frontier wore tightly laced corsets, even for physically demanding tasks like herding cattle or riding a horse over rocky terrain. Just picture trying to climb into a high pommel saddle while a rigid contraption of whalebone and steel is actively trying to crush your ribs and rearrange your internal organs. It was a level of commitment to a specific silhouette that seems utterly insane by modern standards. Forget dysentery or gunfights. The real daily survival challenge for many women was simply managing to draw a full breath while looking proper for a society that didn't even have paved roads yet.
Number 8. Buffalo chips, the romance of burning poop. When you're a settler on the vast treeless prairie, the nights get freezing, and firewood is about as common as a polite debate in a lawless saloon. With no trees for miles, pioneers turned to the next best thing: dried animal excrement, specifically buffalo chips, the sun-baked frisbee-like droppings of the American bison. This became the primary fuel for cooking, heating, and light. Imagine the daily family chores list. Finish your chores, kids, then go out and collect 2 buckets of the finest, most flammable poop you can find in the North pasture. While undeniably resourceful, burning dung produced a uniquely pungent, heavy smoke that would permeate everything: your clothes, your hair, and your very soul. The romantic notion of a cozy cabin fire gets a little less charming when you realize the entire house smells like the inside of a buffalo's digestive tract. Every meal you ate was essentially smoked in bison waste. Number 9. The barber surgeon, grooming and malpractice. In the Wild West, specialization was a luxury that small towns couldn't afford. If you had a toothache, needed a quick trim for a wedding, and had a suspicious-looking gunshot wound that was starting to turn green, you didn't need 3 different appointments. You just needed 1 trip to the local barber. These multi-talented individuals were the town's go-to for haircuts, shaves, tooth extractions, minor surgery, and occasionally setting a broken bone. Their medical qualifications were usually non-existent, but they had a steady hand and a strong stomach. The scene was often terrifying. The same straight razor that just gave a man a close shave might be used moments later to lance a boil or dig out a bullet, with nothing more than a quick wipe on a dirty rag in between. It was a terrifyingly efficient one-stop shop for all your grooming and medical malpractice needs. Number 10. The Camel Corps, the Army's greatest fail. Somewhere deep in the bureaucratic heart of the U.S. Army in the 1850s, an officer had an idea that was so far outside the box it had clearly never even seen the box. His logic was simple. The American Southwest is hot and sandy. Camels live in places that are hot and sandy. Therefore, we need a U.S. Army Camel Corps. They actually went through with it, importing a whole herd of these cantankerous, spitting creatures from the Middle East. The experiment was a comical disaster. The camels absolutely terrified the Army's horses and mules, who refused to be near them. The camels' soft, desert-adapted feet were shredded by the sharp, rocky terrain of the American Rockies, and the soldiers, trained to ride horses, had absolutely no idea how to handle a 1,500-pound animal with a bad attitude. The project was eventually abandoned, and the camels were sold to circuses or simply left to wander the desert, forming the grumpiest, most out-of-place feral herd in North American history. So there you have it, a 10-chapter salute to historical incompetence and frontier nonsense. We like to think of the Wild West as a time of sharp-shooting heroes, but the reality was a lot more like a group of people trying to survive on a diet of liquid heroin and burnt buffalo poop while their pants exploded. But we know for every dumb fact we dug up, there's another one buried in the desert sands. So, what is the single most absurd piece of frontier history we were foolish enough to overlook? The comments section is now open for your historical deep cuts. If you enjoyed this journey into the shallow end of the historical gene pool, hit that like button and subscribe. Stay smart, stay safe, and for heaven's sake, watch where you step.